Hello and welcome everyone to today's CX Network webinar, and we are focusing on the future of customer experience in the travel, tourism and hospitality industry. And here with us today we've got the European expert panel. So I'm your host for today, Shanice Henry, Editor-in-Chief of CX Network. So as many of us have felt personally, the global pandemic of 2020 has been incredibly disruptive. It's triggered an unprecedented health, social and economic emergency. But one of the most affected sectors, I'm sure we can all agree, during the crisis has been the travel, tourism and hospitality industry, with mandatory closures and the virus containment protocols shutting down borders and bringing the industry close to a complete standstill. It's had a lot to adapt to. As of October 2020, there were 900 million fewer international tourist arrivals compared to the year prior, and this resulted in a $900 billion loss globally, which is a massive hit. And looking at Europe in particular, there's been a 68% decrease in arrivals from January to October, so a lot of disruption going on. So now fast forward to where we are in 2021, and while the COVID-19 virus remains a threat at large, there is hope on the horizon. We're starting to see the rollout of COVID-19 vaccines. Borders are tentatively opening up and strategies around that are being built. But a lot of us are left asking, what is the permanent impact that the pandemic has had on the industry and how people will travel going forward? So here with us today, we've got a panel of experts to have a look at COVID-19's impact on the travel, tourism and hospitality industry, and also take a look at the technology trends that we can expect going into the year that we are now, 2021. So we'll just start off with the agenda for today. So I'll just recap some housekeeping tips and tricks so that you guys are aware of how to best use the platform today with us. I'll introduce you to your panelists, and then we're going to dive into our discussion. So we've got a few points mapped out that we'd like to explore with you today. And we do have a live Q&A at the end. So in terms of housekeeping, the few reminders that I want to give is that this is a very, very interactive webinar. As I just mentioned, we'll have the live Q&A at the end. We will have polls peppered throughout the session. So we want to hear from you. Do you agree with where the discussion's going? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts? What are your concerns about where we're at? We really want to hear from you guys out there in the audience. So do get involved in the polls. Instructions will be given on how to do that as we go through. And do make sure that you enter any of your comments, thoughts, questions in that chat box at the bottom of your screens. And likewise, for any technical issues, write those into the chat boxes too, and we'll get to those right away and troubleshoot with you to make sure that we can get you back on track. All right, so as promised, we've got a couple of experts here with us today. So first up, we have Edmund Ovington, who's the VP of Partnerships and Alliances at Unbabel. So Edmund drives value from Unbabel's customer base through close relationships with key partners and investors such as Salesforce, Microsoft, Samsung, Google, to name a few big names. And he has more than 15 years of experience in the high-growth tech space. We also have with us today Vera Rubinka, who's head of reviews at AppFollow. With a vast experience in mobile gaming, e-commerce and SaaS, she brings all her knowledge to enhance support team routine and provide high quality ratings and review insights via building great services at AppFollow. And finally, we've got Cherie Raffi, Senior Account Executive at Freshworks. So Cherie works with mid-market and enterprise customers in UK and Ireland. She specialises in contact centre transformation projects. I'm sure she's been very busy in the last 12 months, typically moving customers from disjointed systems to a singular customer support system to improve the experience for both customers and the employees alike. In her spare time, she enjoys cooking up a feast, and I know that she's been organising cook-offs for the Freshworks team to engage everybody in her colleagues' stratosphere during the lockdown that we've got in the UK. So Cherie, Edmund and Vera, it's great to have you guys with us today. Thanks for your time. So we're going to get started with a poll. We want to first off hear from you guys. So you've got a poll on your screens now, which the question that we're looking at here is, what do you see the primary reason as for people traveling during the pandemic? Is it personal necessity, health, relocation, or emergency? Is it for work? Or is it for fun or leisure? So we'd like you to select your answer actually on the slide view screen. So click the answer that you guys would like to affiliate or vote for, and then please make sure that you click that all-important submit button, because without that, we won't be able to hear from you and your vote will go to waste. So what, in your opinion, is the primary reason people travel during the pandemic? Was it personal necessity? So health, relocation, emergency, were they stranded after being on holiday and needed to get back home? Was it for work? So for some absolutely imperative reason, they had to travel for work. Or was it for fun and leisure? I know that there were some points in the last year where virus rates came down and there was a little bit more movement happening within the travel and hospitality industries around the world. So that could be a valid answer as well. So we'll just give you guys a couple of seconds. I could see some votes coming through, so thank you to those of you that have already voted. Please just make sure that you click that submit button after selecting your answer in the slide view in the middle of your screens. Okay, so let's see the answers that we've got coming through here. So the first answer here that we've got come through is for work was seen as the primary reason people traveled during the pandemic. Next up, we have personal necessity, and then for fun and leisure. I think that cascades pretty logical. Cherie, do you have any thoughts on these answers and any surprises here in terms of what you expected to come through? I think for me, that's pretty much what the spread that I expected. Or to be fair, maybe personal necessity could have been the first one. What do you think, Cherie?
Yeah, I agree with you. And definitely, I think for work has been the majority of the reason why a lot of people have been traveling, especially due to the regulations that are in place at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's move to our first point for this session. So a nice broad point for us to kind of give good context in terms of where we're at with the current state of the industry. So the first point here we're looking at is what is the current state of the industry and what's changed most in the last year or so. Vera, it would be great to hear from you on this one. So what are your thoughts in terms of the current state of the industry? Where are we at now? And what has changed the most in the last year? You might be spoilt for choice on that last point, but it would be great to hear from you, Vera.
Right. So hi, everyone. Yeah, this is definitely has been a year for travel industry, a tough one. So it's interesting to see how strong the industry is and how it is recovering. So what we did at Follow, we analyzed the mobile traffic and the reviews and how the users are now working with different types of apps, be it a travel app, accommodation app, etc. And we analyzed the trends I'd like to share with you guys. So we analyzed both App Store and Google Play. And what we see is that App Store users have much faster recovery in the pandemic rather than Google Play. AFN accommodation engine apps have a more steady recovery than branded ones, probably because not all branded ones have full recovery, and because at this point, the traveling is not more of a choice, like I prefer to fly with this airlines or another airlines. It's more like I just want to get from here to there, and it's still very challenging, right? And for App Store travel apps, it has returned to 50% of volume of 2019, which I find great. Google Play is around 35% volume. So what we see is the industry is still recovering. Let's have a closer look how it's working for different industries. So this is first apps we're looking at are airlines. So this is App Store. So the way you can look at graph is the red line is average reviews rating. So this is how users are content or how the experience is. With app, but also was generally what's happening in the industry, because this is like the final result, the final review they're rating. And the blue line is the volume of the reviews, which basically the volume of interactions with the app. I would see it as a hallmark of how general the travel industry is doing, because everything's so much digital now, right? So you can see the iOS airline apps are recovering after pandemic to 50% volume. Customer satisfaction rate has had a drop in March to in April, which is pretty obvious because there are so many limitations and such huge challenges the travel industry has. But now it has fully recovered, which is a very good sign because it shows that basically things are getting back to normal and the airlines have found a way to, facilitate those needs. As far as Google Play, well, you can see that, well, it's not that good because they had a bigger plateau and started to recover just in September. So now the progress is slower, but well, it's still a very good trend. So that took a longer period of time. It's now better. And but an interesting thing here is that customer satisfaction level has decreased. And we can see that there are more issues here from Google Play users, probably because there are more, bigger versatility of devices they're using, or, just bigger audience they have. So in general, it's still pretty challenging that we can say about airlines. As far as airfare search engines, so it's pretty interesting that they have a very gradual recovery and a stronger trend here after pandemic. But, it has had a bigger plateau, but it looks like airfare search engines, they're just feeling a little bit more, sure about what they're doing. And they're very, very gradually increasing. But there's still a little bit issues with customer satisfaction level. And for Google Play, it's more or less, but there's bigger growth last few months, but customers are less satisfied. And this is the similar trend as we see on other apps. So it looks like Google Play users have a little bit more issues there, or maybe we just have more feedback from them because of bigger audience, right? And as far as accommodation, so I'm talking about different booking applications. So it's still very proper recovery, and you see that the satisfaction rate is good. So it's back to normal, and now it's fully recovered. And as far as Google Play, they also had a bigger plateau, and their satisfaction decreased, but still higher than it used to be for airfare rate. So this way, one can say that, well, it's better than in March and May, but still slower than usual, which I think we can see from offline world as well. Customers at the same time have become more demanding and concerned, but I think this is because travel is still pretty much challenging. There are many issues happening with cancellations and many stuff like that, a limited amount of offers, restrictions, and we see that App Store users have a little bit better, quality than Google Play, but yeah, this is what we have to see.
Great. So what I'm hearing there is there's a dip in terms of satisfaction at the sort of the onset of the pandemic. There is a bit of recovery, but we're not quite there yet in some spots. So there's a little bit of a way to go.
50% that way. But still, what we need to understand what this data shows is that there's still a lot of recovery we're looking for. So if you just look at the graph, you see that the volume is not there. The customer satisfaction rate is also a bit lower because it's more challenging. So it's important to work harder for this customer experience, because this is the time where your clients actually really, really need your help and need you there.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Edmund, it'd be great to hear from yourself at this point. So what are your thoughts on where the industry is at? What have you observed in terms of what's changed most in the last year as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll answer this with two hats. So I guess my work hat, we work with a huge number of airlines and OTAs, and there's almost been three parts to the story. Kind of the first half of last year being dark and bad, and all the conversations were about bailouts and survival. And then the second half of the last year, people getting to grips with it, but it being incredibly uncertain. There was no real timelines, no real reason to have hope about when this would end. It was something we knew would end, but it wasn't anything you could particularly plan against. In that area as well, a few companies doing the obvious pivots and diversification into whether it be more work from home approaches if you're Airbnb, and different sort of styles of business that they were particularly doing with consumers. And then this third part of the story now is the best, right? It's the optimism, it's the hope. There feels like there's something to look forward to, and suddenly although you probably can't plan against it, and we work with language with our clients, so you're not quite sure exactly where your business is going to come from and exactly how it's going to look, but at least you can be sure that it's going to start to come back a little bit this year and then a lot next year, and all the stats are starting to add up and point in the same direction. So that's nice. And then, switching hats to me as a consumer, I'm lucky enough to have actually traveled a lot in the last couple of weeks, going from Central America through the US, Europe, and now down into Cape Town. And it was very interesting going from someone in 2018 and 19, probably flying twice, 3 times a week on average, so kind of a seasoned traveler, and then feeling like a bit of a newbie, feeling very uncertain, not knowing particularly how airports work, not knowing how early to get there, not knowing whether, my 3 tests with negatives so far was actually enough, and I was forgetting a piece of paper that I didn't have. And it's interesting because it's certainly a sign of the confusion and the slightly heightened emotional strain that everyone's going to feel as they've traveled for the first and second time over the next few months. And that'll be part of our conversation today, but I think it's very interesting to factor into these bigger conversations about consumers and technology.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. The feeling of being, quite vulnerable now, going from being being a pro in traveling. Everybody's going to be going to that level. So then travel brands, hospitality brands need to be there to comfort, to assure, to give that confidence, because then that will breed loyalty. If there's a bad experience, then we all know that the risk of churn is pretty high. So Sherry, anything to add in terms of the state of the industry and what's changed the most in the last year?
Yeah, I think going on from Edmund's point about feeling quite confused and not knowing what all the different regulations are, I think for companies, what they've been saying to us is that actually they've seen during this time that there's a need for focusing on systems which are really agile and allow them to quickly adapt to the circumstances that we're in. So one of the things for that is obviously updating the FAQs or updating your bots, updating all of the consumer information that you're giving to your customers and making sure that those touch points are really detailed and so that your customer feels like they're in safe hands. But actually one of the problems with the systems that are in the market at the moment is that actually the customer support team has to utilize their internal IT teams to be able to make changes to the information that they're giving their customers. So actually what companies should be focusing on is investing in systems that allow them to be empowered and make changes. For example, Big Bus Tours, which is a really large customer of ours, they utilize our bots, which don't include any code. So they don't have to use their IT teams to make changes. Their head of customer support actually made the changes to their bots themselves and quickly put out information stating what their return policies are and what their COVID regulations are. And that just builds loyalty for the customer, just knowing that you can actually support them throughout that whole experience that they'll have with you. So I think focusing on agile solutions is really the way forward.
Sorry, still had myself on mute after a year of Zooms and webinars. Apologies. I was just saying that the agility that you were just talking about, baking into business processes, there's going to be a lot of growing pains with that, I'm sure, and I've heard from other brands. But that's going to be such a powerful feature going forward, even after the pandemic has kind of, the dust has settled, which I'm sure for a lot of us that can't come too soon. But that's going to make sure that people are agile to what customers need, the voice of the customer. How can you make sure that you're giving what customers are thirsting for in that moment to build more trust, more loyalty? So I think it's definitely a wise direction to be heading in. So let's take a look at our second question. So I know that with the pandemic, when I was speaking to a lot of brands, there was a surge in inquiries as that nervousness came through, unpredictability, what's going to happen to my booking? Is all my money now down the drain? Is my booking going ahead? Is it cancelled? So I guess as we navigate the new normal, there's going to be a bit of hesitancy. People need that comfort, as Edmund was saying, and the assurance of where their booking is heading or what they're sort of going to be expecting. So our next question here is, as customers navigate the new normal, we can expect to see a new boost in queries. So what can businesses do to ensure that they're able to provide satisfactory support to manage the request volume? So Sherry, it'd be great to hear from you on this one in terms of how businesses can be agile. You kind of touched on that in your last point, but what can they do to make sure that they can scale up to provide the support that people need to manage and match that request volume?
Sure, thanks. So Freshworks really believes that there's 4 pillars for travel companies which they need to have in place to ensure that they provide exceptional service. If you don't mind just moving to the next slide. So the first pillar is engagement anywhere. So wherever your customer is, they should be able to interact with you through the channels that they actually want to be interacting with you on. And the experience that they have across those channels should be seamless. It shouldn't be that if I email in, I have a poorer experience than if I call in. So making sure that all of that information is available to your customer. Again, FAQs are an important part of that. Then the second one is actually giving your agents context so that they can provide that exceptional service. What we see a lot of the times is that companies are investing in a lot of different channels, but all of that information is going into multiple different channels. So we've got customers who previously had 9 systems for example, telephony, or for different chat tools for their different regions. But what that means is that there's the information is basically getting lost. So when it comes to the agent being able to do their job, it's really difficult because they don't have that context. So make sure that you actually have an omni-channel tool that can help you with that, as opposed to a multi-channel tool. And then the third one is predictive engagement. So have bots in place which are updated to make your customer's life easier to find that information they're looking for, and also focus on FAQs. 80% of customers want to be able to self-serve, so update those regularly if you can, and also invest in systems that have built out a lot of capabilities for the knowledge base. So for example, workflow approvals. If you need to get information out to your customers, make sure that all of that is approved, gone through to the right manager, and it's all kept within one system. So any changes that are made, you can also keep up to date with those. And then the last piece is, we're all working from home right now. So make it easier for your employees to be able to communicate internally and not lose track of all of that information. It's really key that you empower not only your management team, but also the agents. So really focus on solutions that make their job much easier.
And I think the beautiful part, or the part that I really get excited about, is the predictive engagement. The idea that a brand can preempt and be proactive in terms of looking at existing customer journeys. Where are the common friction points? How can we build our FAQs so that it's not about hiding, manned channels like phone and burying phone numbers or live chat to be a last resort. It's about how do we empower customers so that they can self-serve, so that we nail it. So we answer that question straight away in terms of what they were looking for, or we answer a question that they didn't even think of yet, and they go, actually, that was very helpful. That's been really, really constructive in terms of where my buying journey was going to be heading. So I think very, very, very important points there. So Vera, it would be great to get your thoughts as well in regards to how businesses can ensure that they are able to flex to provide satisfactory support around the clock. Oh, Vera, we can't hear you at the moment, so you might be on mute, I'm thinking. Okay, it seems like Vera is having a couple of technical issues, so we'll progress onwards, and hopefully, Vera, you can get to the bottom of those, and we'll hear from you later on. So we'll progress to the next poll. So we'd love to hear from you out there in the audience again. So in regards to the changes that you guys have seen looking at traffic or number of people traveling since the end of 2020 to the start of 2021, have you seen a slow increase in people traveling, a sharp increase in people traveling, a decrease, or no change? So few to no people traveling. So looking at the amount of people traveling since the end of 2020 to now, are you seeing a slow increase, a sharp increase, a decrease, or no change? So please do make sure you select your answer on this slide in front of you. It's multiple choice, so you can only have one answer, I'm afraid. Make sure you click that submit button as well, so that we can actually see your answers coming through. I can see the results coming up and down on our side, so thanks to those that have already entered. I can see some of you haven't quite yet, so please make your decisions and then we'll take a look at the answers. Okay, I'll just give you a couple more seconds. So a reminder of the question: what change have you seen in terms of the amount of people traveling since the end of 2020 to now? Has there been a slow increase, a sharp increase, a decrease, or no change? All right, let's go across to the results. Okay, so the most popular answer here is a slow increase of people traveling since the end of 2020. Then we have no change, so few to no people traveling, and we've even seen a bit of a decrease. So Edmund, keen to get your thoughts on this, because I know that you've been one of those people that have been in the traveling camp. Any thoughts on the spread of answers here? Are they surprising or what you expected?
Yeah, I think tallies perfectly with what I saw in person in the airports. There's a slow increase. Airports are still pretty empty. Most duty free is still closed. The ramp is slow, which is great. It's giving everyone time, especially the staff, to kind of find their feet. There's obviously a couple of interesting hotspots around the world, with Mexico and Dubai specifically, that are still seeing high levels of tourism because they're the only places that are open, which is kind of shocking to see when you're there. And it's actually a little bit aggressive to be in those situations when you're suddenly realizing that you're in a room surrounded by hundreds of people and you haven't been in that place for at least a year. But yeah, generally, I think in all of the airports I've been through in the last 4 weeks, it was that feeling that everyone's probably experienced, where you get that perfect flight at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and you end up in an empty airport. And you just whiz through security and everything feels like a breeze. The whole world feels like that right now, which is pretty good, with extra safety, which everyone loves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's never been more important than now. But of course, when you're traveling, it's always been a thing, but now it's even more so. All right. So let's take a little bit of a look on the tech side of things. We've been dipping into this a little bit. So there's several factors that impact when and how customers will travel. But how important is CX here? And also what kind of technology can help ensure that customers continue to have those good experiences when they travel, or if they do encounter a point of friction, that it's it's neutralized quickly. So Cherie, it would be great to hear your thoughts on this one, in terms of how important is CX in terms of travel, and what tech is out there to ensure that we can be enhancing those journeys.
Sure. So I think technology and investing in customer experience now is so important, especially due to all the points I've mentioned so far in this webinar that we've had, which is, customers are really uncertain. And so the more that you invest in your CX, the better brand loyalty you can create, because you're actually supporting your customer. And also a report done by McKinsey & Co. actually found that if you do invest in CX during economic downturns, you can see 3 times increase in shareholder revenue. So it's always worth doing it. one of the things that I think is really important to invest in is obviously the channels that you're available on. Really understand your customer and be available on those channels. If you don't mind just changing slides.
Yes, of course.
So, for example, in the UK, 80% of UK citizens aged between 18 to 34 are on WhatsApp. And I'm sure that actually a lot of people on this call are also using WhatsApp today. But what I find when looking at any travel company, even the ones that are focusing on that age group, they don't really utilize WhatsApp. Whereas Get Your Guide, which is a customer of ours, they utilize us from an omni-channel perspective, but actually they've now also utilized our WhatsApp integration that we have. And they've seen a 25% volume shift from email to WhatsApp. So it's really key that you start to open up the channels that your customers want to be communicating with you on, especially now when there's so much uncertainty. If you are abroad and you need to get in contact with a customer support team, if you can contact them through WhatsApp, it's a lot easier than trying to connect to their live chat or any other kinds of channel that they might have. The second one is making sure that you're providing an omni-channel experience for your customer and also for your agents. Don't just be multi-channel. There is a big difference. Multi-channel still means that all of your data will be in different systems. So don't do that if you can. And also focusing on using systems which are really user-friendly for your agents. I can't go on about that enough. Making your agent's life a lot easier is paramount. We have invested heavily in an agent assist bot. So that's basically what you have from a customer experience, but instead it's for your agents. So making sure that they also have that information at their fingertips in line with the branding and messaging that you want, they can get back in touch with your customer and give them that information. So really empower your agents.
I think that completely aligns with a lot of the studies that I've encountered in the last few years, is that, yes, tech is incredibly important, but actually what people value the most is having accessible, friendly, knowledgeable sources of information, whether that is humans, whether that is bots. And I think that is incredibly intuitive to have a bot that looks to assist and augment your human agents, because if they have access to information in real time that is going to empower the consumer, that's what the consumer is going to appreciate. Even if you have sort of tech that's shiny and brilliant, but when you actually go to use it, is it that helpful? That's not really what the customer wants. They want to be assisted quickly with, a friendly sort of level of service that's knowledgeable and can give them the support they need. So I think that's a brilliant move in terms of empowering your employees.
Yeah, and I think also we are going to see a massive increase in the number of queries that are coming in. So being able to have systems in place that also help your agents to deflect some of those tickets so that they can just focus on the harder ones would be great as well for the agent.
Absolutely. And also they can help give, those self-service tools can help give the 24-hour access that maybe can't be manned with humans, as some companies might not be able to. So, when somebody finishes work and they want to ask a question, even if your agents are off for the day, that they've got other resources that they can tap into in the meantime and go, right, I've got my answer I needed. I'm on my way onto the rest of the tasks I have to do. So we're coming up to the audience Q&A. So please do enter in any questions that you've got for our panelists using your chat boxes on the bottom of your screens. Do click submit as well to make sure that your points come through. So Edmund, I've got a couple of questions here for you. I'm going to combine them just so that we've got a lot of time for the audience Q&A. So we're looking at tech. Of course, travelers are becoming more and more tech-friendly, and the experiences that they're having with other brands are only sort of boosting their expectations for the rest of the market and other industries. So, of course, businesses need to be able to provide agile experiences to travellers. What does that include in your opinion? And I know that the emotional experience is something that a lot of brands have been tapping into. So it would be great if you could help circle around that. So looking at tech, how can businesses be agile to customer needs? And what's changed around the emotional experience? And I'm sure you can speak to that from personal experience with actually traveling yourself in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think about this in two ways, actually. So one is, I really like that McKinsey. We're working with a lot of our customers now, almost in a moment when they can get it right. They can get things ready for the scale that's coming. In a way, I often talk to our travel customers pre-COVID and felt like they were just firefighting to the nth degree. And that's from many perspectives. If you're an airline, you're working on pretty tough margins. You've got pretty serious customer complaints beyond your average coming in on a regular basis. Same with rideshare companies, same with accommodation companies. And you've got almost a very tough and a very dark, but a moment to breathe now and get things right and solid and scalable for the future. And the other, building a bit as well on Sherry's point, was this concept of removing barriers applies both to channels and the vehicles of choice for the customer for conversation. But for us, it's also things like language, right? It's making sure companies think globally. They understand that their clients are going to be going on the government websites of various countries and being very confused. We all are, and it's the standard thing. The advice almost seems contradictory at times. You go on two different websites that says very different things, and they've got to be the conduit to clarity, simplicity, and in our world, it's in the language of the customer, right? Expecting the customer to flex towards you and speak, the 5 languages you support or anything like that is, it's a little bit like the change that's happened where you used to have to pay for even an extra pound of baggage on the airlines, but now they're begging you for any business. It's kind of everything's leaning in the consumer's direction, which I don't mind at all. And I think that's great. And I think companies that embrace that are doing really well. I felt it even from early on in 2020 with Delta, their communications through Ed, their CEO. In the emails, they stated their stance, even from a political perspective in terms of taking masks seriously and things like that from early. And that trust, actually, even before I was even thinking about traveling, started to brew because of the communications and because of the way that they were leaning into the customer. And I think the brands that will thrive over the next 2 years are very likely to be the ones that have already started doing that.
That's a brilliant point, that it's not just about engaging with the customer when they're looking to buy or looking to book. It's where that road it's already started in terms of how you're already communicating. Language, so important as well, that you make sure that you're speaking the same language as your customers and you're not pulling them to use your language. You're meeting them in the moments that matter to them in the language that they resonate with and that they use, because that bond then and rapport is only going to build higher and higher. Okay, so just before we reach our final panel discussion question, and then we'll go into the live Q&A, thank you to the audience members that have entered in their questions. Please do keep submitting those. So the final poll question that we've got for you guys leads into what we had Sherry saying earlier in regards to FAQs, making sure that they're aligned with what customers want to see and the questions that they have. But what are you guys seeing as the frequently asked questions from travellers currently? Is it around safety protocols? So what we were saying about masks, maybe about disinfecting surfaces, about distancing of people. Is it about cancellation policies or booking flexibility? The unpredictable nature of the pandemic has got a lot of people feeling a bit hesitant about booking far in advance. So is cancellation policies and booking flexibility a key thing that you're seeing from customers? Offers or discounts, people looking to be compensated in some way in terms of the finance of taking a risk of making a booking maybe for early on in terms of the lockdowns being lifted in different areas of the world? Or is it travel rules and regulations? As Edmund said, they're incredibly confusing. They're changing all the time. They're contradictory. Are customers coming to you for insight on that? So please do enter in your answer. Select your answer on the screen. You guys should be pretty au fait with how to do this now, but make sure you click that submit button there to make sure that we get your answers through. So we'll give you a couple more seconds to do that. So in terms of frequently asked questions from travellers currently, are those questions around safety protocols mainly? Is it around cancellation policies or booking flexibility? Is it offers or discounts? Or are we looking at travel rules and regulations insights? So we'll just give you a couple more seconds to enter in your most asked question, and we will then move along to the results. And Vera, it would be great to hear from you in terms of the results that we see come through. So we'll just have a look at those now. Okay, so the most frequently asked question is around cancellation policies and booking flexibility. So it would be great to get your perspective on this, Vera. Is this what you expected to see? And in terms of looking at the stats that you presented earlier, do we think this will change in the next few months, or do we think this is going to be a consistent trend that we'll see for 2021?
Right. So, well, generally, I see that, well, cancellation policy takes a lot of place, a lot of pain. And one can understand that because this is not only one is emotional about cancellation, but also about the money the guys are using. And I think if you look at reviews, you'll see the similar trend that it's unclear how to cancel, how to change your, date of the flight, etc., and how flexible the tickets are. So I think this is something we could predict it and could foresee. And unfortunately, I'd say that we will stick with this for, I think, this year for sure. And it will gradually go slower as, more countries open, and the COVID is battled and defeated, hopefully, right? Because as long as we have all these limitations in traveling, it still will be very much a concern. Well, I can see that, travel rules and regulations are also a thing, but, obviously, because this is the thing we didn't have for so many years, and it's like the 2020 is like when so many rules introduced, to which country can fly, what are the rules. So as long as we have this rules and regulation, the situation with COVID-19 is very, very, serious, we'll have these issues, but hopefully it will gradually decrease, and we can see from the volume of traveling, which is coming back to normal, I think that the trend of these two will be decreasing. Well, safety protocols will probably be for us for a longer period of time, because even if it's not a red zone anymore, it's still an issue, and still probably an issue until everyone get a vaccine. So yeah, this is what I see from my side.
Great. So I think I'll pose the last question to you initially, and then we'll hear from the other members of the panel. So looking at those points you just made there, in that we'll see that those trends being pretty prevalent for the foreseeable until things start to ease up considerably in terms of virus transmission and management. So what are a few steps or tips for businesses to thrive in the current scenario? A big question.
Right. So I'd say that one major trend we need to admit, and this is basically the trend that has been there for a lot of time, but COVID-19 make it like the major trend, is digitalization. And if your application or if your service doesn't have a mobile app or at least a web form, this is definitely the time for a business to go and make it, because everyone become much more digital, and there will be fewer offices, fewer ticket offices, fewer stuff like that, but more digital solutions. And COVID-19 made so many businesses to move online. So, and with traveling, it probably would be like majority online. If it was 20 to 80 before, it will be like 95% online experience. So take care about your online experience. And with those challenges we see prevailing probably this year and maybe the next, who knows, I think support is more important than ever, because as you see, there are many tricky issues with cancellation, flexibility, regulations, and these challenges they're facing, they're bigger in volume, because obviously there were cancellations before, but the percent of users who faced that was so much less than now, so that you probably need to, think about your support policy, think about things you can automate and replying to users promptly, because obviously there's challenging issues that require very quick reply rate, and increase efforts, reduce your average reply time, and well, your customers thank you later because they remember that you were with them and you helped them in hard times we're now still facing. Right. So in order to so this is like, at this point, I think it's still a little bit slow now. So it's time to reiterate, rethink your strategy, rethink how you're treating your customers, what can you automate, how we can help bigger amount of customers with a similar amount of effort. Right. And I think digitalization will probably stay with us from now on forever. So get used to it and think how you can embrace and make your business grow with it.
Totally agree. The pandemic has encouraged a lot of new behaviours, and like you said, digitalisation and the adoption of digital channels has been accelerated at an unprecedented rate. So absolutely, if you haven't already, I'm shocked if a brand hasn't gotten on board with digitalising and giving more options. But that's definitely something that we're going to need to keep focusing on and reducing any friction points. So Edmund, really curious to hear your perspective in terms of tips for businesses to thrive in the current scenario.
Yeah, so many great things mentioned already, so I won't reiterate any of them. One thing that struck me as I was traveling was how one opportunity has been missed for a lot of travel companies to more heavily play in the context of an ecosystem, by which I mean that you never travel just using one vendor, unless you very weirdly on a specific package holiday. But really, when you go through a travel experience, it will involve a lot of different companies, from how you get to the airport to the airport itself, to the customs at the airport, which are again run by a different organization, to maybe one or multiple airlines, and the same on the other side. And they have, through necessity and architecture, been single entities. They've not particularly joined up the experience and made it a pleasurable experience. It's kind of something that we've endured and we've enjoyed. We've endured rather than enjoyed. And I wonder if that's going to change. I wonder if the future of travel, as this moment allows the customer to take back some control, will end up with us actually having a more pleasurable experience end to end, rather than just we all know that one hotel can make everything different, or the one airline that gives you the upgrade can make it a difference. But it rarely comes as a full circle service, if you like, where the vendors are talking to each other like they would in another part of the world, where our partnership with Freshworks is a good example. We have to work hand in hand for our customers, and there's not really any other choice. It's the only way we can do it is to build value together for the customer and talk a lot behind the scenes and then present it jointly to the customer. And the travel industry has never had to do it that much before, and I think that could be in a very exciting, optimistic and positive way for companies to start to differentiate themselves, a little bit like Airline Alliances tried to, but a little bit beyond that, I think.
Great. And just as we are about to enter the audience Q&A, so a reminder to audience members, do keep entering in your questions. Cherie, anything else to add in terms of tips, best practices, golden rules for thriving in the current scenario?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are now looking at AI and potentially moving towards that. I would say use AI, but make sure that the solutions that you go for aren't robotic. And that they're tools that actually learn on the job. And also make it so that if your customer is using things like live chat, that if they leave your page, that chat doesn't just end. It's actually asynchronous, so that the customer can then come back to it and have that conversation ongoing, and that conversation doesn't just get lost. So really invest in solutions that allow you to have a seamless experience, both on the customer side and also from a company point of view and your agents. It's really important that you invest in solutions that allow you to be agile and make changes as you require.
I'm sitting here nodding and smiling because I'm sure I'm not alone in that. We've all come into, encountered those chat boxes where you put in all of your information, you get asked for things time and time again, you put everything in, you put in your question, and then for some reason the page refreshes or something drops out. You go back onto the page and everything's gone. And you just think, I've now got to go through all of that again. So the point that you just made there about making sure it's an asynchronous conversation, evergreen, that somebody can come back to, super important, and can remove friction rather than deploying AI or machine learning, thinking this is great, it's going to help remove, frustrations for customers, and actually it's adding frustration. So I think you're right. You've got to be incredibly strategic in the tech that you provide and making sure that it's adding ease and not more frustration. All right. So let's hear from you guys in the audience. So I can see that we've got a couple questions coming through. So thanks for sending those in. If you haven't already, do enter in your questions into the chat box. Click that all-important submit button, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. We've got a couple of minutes to go through those. If we don't manage to address your question, we do have the capability to get back to you after the session today. So don't let time put you off from entering in the questions that you've got here. So we've got a question that's come in here from Ian, which is looking at making sure that the journeys that customers go through in terms of the brand experience, and I guess their actual journeys, because we're looking at travel, is as seamless as possible. So we've got here that some airlines can make it difficult to navigate restrictions, or maybe they're not doing as much as they could to remove friction. So are you guys on the panel seeing enough investment from the industry, in your opinion, to make it as seamless as possible for the traveller? And I guess I'm going to pose this one to you, Edmund, because I know that you've been out there traveling and experiencing things in terms of the travel industry. So are you seeing enough investment to make things as seamless as possible for travellers, Edmund?
Yeah, it was a super interesting question, Ian, and I think usage of built up credits, and I think that part is worth pausing on for a moment, because a lot of us do have, whether it be airline credits or hotel credits or credit card points or even gift vouchers that we never got to use from different walks of life, that are sort of building up, and we're quite excited to use them. And actually, I am seeing, both from airlines and boutique establishments or whatever it might be, a huge amount of flexibility in how they're letting you use those things, way beyond what you were ever able to before. And that, for me, is very encouraging. It's one of the reasons I'm very optimistic about the industry and for our overall enjoyment of flying and traveling around moving forward, is because the power shift that I've talked about a few times does make it so that the businesses need us, right? And not in a nasty way, but in a healthy way of saying, if we've got something that resembles a value of loyalty, so a credit is a great way to explain that. I should get to decide how to use that, not you. You shouldn't say it's this one flight, this one day a year that I can get a $10 discount on. It should be, I can use that value however I want with your company, because frankly, as a company, you're lucky that I'm using you. Thank you very much, which is sort of the harsh reality of this. And I've actually seen it so far in every single brand I've used over the last few weeks. That's exactly how they're acting, and I think exactly how they're also weather the storm in the long term, to be honest.
Mm. Sherry, do you have anything to add to that point?
Yeah, so actually my experience in comparison to Edmund's was totally different. I actually did have flights booked to go to Miami last year, and I accepted the vouchers that I was given because the company that I had booked my holiday through was a really well-known company and still is. But actually, when I went to use the voucher, I couldn't input that into anywhere when I went to check out. And instead, I was told to call the company, which I did. And then it was a 20-minute wait, which is fine. But then I had a message saying, sorry, but we've got really long queues, and the phone was put down. So I then couldn't use the voucher that I was given. And there was no way of using that within their website. No chatbot could help me. There was no web form to help me. So instead, I had to do a claim back through my bank. And actually, that's really a shame for me as a customer, because I was loyal to that brand. I didn't ask for my money back initially. I was happy to leave that with them and book once the lockdown regulations changed. So one thing I would say is actually, again, have things in place that allow you to be agile and make those changes. If you see that as a problem, make the amendment, because customers, there's so many different choices available to you now in terms of vendors. So make sure that you're up to date in terms of allowing people to use the vouchers that you're giving them.
Absolutely. So from your perspective, there's more investment needed to make sure things are seamless. Definitely. So let's move on to another question here. I'm going to pose this one to you, Vera. So this question that we've got from Alex is asking, do we think that business travel will resume as before this year? Do we think it's going to be different? What are your predictions, Vera, on that?
Right. So what we can see already is that the volume is growing bigger. And I'd say that I think for business travel, the recovery speed will be faster, because it's pushed not just by, leisure activities, but more business purpose. And what we can see from the restrictions we have around a large amount of countries is that they make different regulations if you have a business visa or travel visa. So in most countries, travel visas still not accepted. You're not allowed to enter the country. But if it's a business travel, it's more, I think, soft rules there. So I'd say that, yes, business travel will resume. I cannot say whether it happened this year, but it would definitely happen next year, by the next year, because, well, this is everybody is interested in, every single country, because obviously we should remember that COVID-19 is not just a disease, but it also brings economic crisis all over the world, because it makes so many things so much harder. And it's not about leisure activities only. It's any type of business, basically, right? So I'd say that, yeah, business travels have high chances to recover this year, but we cannot guarantee that. I'd say it's more would happen by 2022.
Great. Anything to add, Shuri or Edmund, on that, or shall we move on to our final question?
I'm actually, I'm not sure. So at a macro level, I agree. I think we'll see the same volumes overall within 2022 as we saw before. I think the world is just bounce back and be kind of resilient, if you like, in the longer term. On a personal level, I don't think I will. I think I will travel a significant amount less. I think I've seen a significant enough increase in my personal productivity, my ability to think more clearly by staying in one place and not traveling all the time, not have to deal with the time zone, hotchkotch and the jet lag. And the gains were enough to make me really properly reconsider my amount of travel days, which were probably too high in the first place. So I might be a more edge case, if you like. But couple that with the idea that we've gone through a year now of proving that meetings with customers or with our seniors or with our partners can be almost as productive via Zoom, obviously not completely, and there are fringe benefits missing, without having to spend 24 hours traveling to get there. And I think that's a very interesting concept is, being able to do this right now with you is so much easier for me to both say yes to and actually do, because it really took me maybe 2 hours total of my time. And whereas if I'd have to fly to Munich or wherever you might have done this, that would be quite tough and quite laborious. And I probably would have said no. And so that ability to be more in charge of who we are, and us going through the last year to make us realize either what we think about this or what position we're in, whether we want to travel or not, and it also goes into families and other factors. I think for a lot of people who used to travel a lot may lead to them traveling maybe something like half or 2/3 as much as they used to, if I was going to make a bet for myself.
So that's a significant drop in any case. But I think you're right. The pandemic, of course, it's had caused a lot of damage, but it has opened our eyes in a lot of areas, whether it's working from home or, like you said, how much can be done productively while working remotely. So I'm pretty sure that's all we've got time for today. I can see we've got a couple of extra questions that have come in. Don't worry, we will have the ability to reach out to you afterwards to make sure that you get an answer to your points. So thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and feelings towards our discussion today. So if you'd like to re-watch this presentation, we will be sharing access with you to watch it on demand shortly. We'll be emailing you a link. So you'll be able to share that with your colleagues, anybody that wasn't able to attend or might not have known about the session happening today. Do share that with them, and please do let us know of your thoughts on the session via the chat box that you've been using today. And also, before you go, we've got some interesting resources from Freshworks in the Resource Centre that's on your screens at the bottom left-hand side. So we've got an ebook which dives into a lot of the stats and the trends that we've mentioned today at the start of the session. And we also have a demo link which will give you access to a little bit more of a tour of what Freshworks can provide, the different features, capabilities, and success stories that they have as well. So do make sure that you check those out before you leave us today at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so thanks again for all who've attended today, and a big thank you, of course, to our panel of experts. And that concludes today's presentation.